on you.
Hello and welcome to the Football League Weekly. A weekly, or well, it's usually just one show a week, show looking into the Football League. And this week we're doing a very special Football League Weekly Extra, where a certain manager has been sacked from Bolton Wanderers. So, David, it's very unusual that we're going live twice a week, but as always happens, news broke after we did the show yesterday that Ian Evatt was potentially going to be leaving Bolton. And this morning we were greeted with the news that he had indeed mutually parted ways with Bolton, but we're assuming it means he's been sacked. So can we read too much into the verbal jargon that has been bandied about by Bolton in regards to how they separated? Or do you reckon he walked away, basically?
I think it's a tough one to judge, but before I try to judge it, yeah, I mean, this is meant to be a Football League Weekly, isn't it? And I remember when we were planning the episode last night, we looked through League One, didn't we? And we thought, what can we actually have a substance within the division to actually talk about? And it was difficult, wasn't it? There weren't much going on, was there? So we thought we'd sort of review the Birmingham game that I put on the vlog. And then even at that, we still wanted more, didn't we? We wanted more from League One. And then, of course, typical for us, mate. Typical in our fashion. As soon as we wake up this morning, what happens? Big news drops in League One. So hence why we are back. It is tough because you look at the quotes from Ian Evatt, and it does look, or it gives the impression anyway, that he did walk away. That's the impression that it gives. I can't remember the exact quote, but he talks about the fact that the relationship between him and the players sort of broke down, but he still believes that this group of players can mount a successful League One season. Realistically, can they? I do have my doubts. If I'm being perfectly honest, I do have my doubts. A lot of my doubts at the start of the season over Bolton Wanderers were because of Ian Evatt, I'll be honest. And I think from what we saw, especially early on in the season, I think those doubts were well-founded, because I think that you look at, I think it was the Huddersfield at home game where they lost 3 or 4-0 at home. And he was so insistent, wasn't he, on playing out from the back. And they really caused their own problems. And I think from that moment forwards, questions were asked, weren't they? And over the weeks, you look at press conferences, some of the quotes that he said, and the way he threw his players under the bus, it was leading to this moment, wasn't it? It was more of a question of when rather than if he was going to get sacked.
Yeah, and we'll take a look at his dealings with the media in a minute. But if you are watching live on Twitter, then head over to the YouTube to get involved in the conversation. If you actually click on the live stream, if you are watching on Twitter, then you can get involved in the live chat as well, and we'll be able to see your comments. So send in your questions, your thoughts on Ian Evatt getting sacked by Bolton, and good evening to Ian. I'd be fascinated to hear your opinion on the news, Ian, and what you made of Ian Evatt getting sacked. But let's talk about how they've done this season, because Bolton's form has declined this season drastically. In their last game, Ian Evatt's last game in charge, they lost 2-1 to Charlton Athletic, and the loss left Bolton 9th in League One. Only, and it's worth mentioning this, 3 points off the playoffs. So, look, I was listening to a Bolton podcast earlier on this morning, and the person on it mentioned how Ian Evatt should have been sacked before Christmas, and how the timing of it being sacked was really bizarre, given where we are in the January transfer window, and given how signings have already been made by Bolton. So what do you make of the timing of it? Because I tend to agree with that Bolton podcast. It's bizarre timing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what I've said previously about January's sort of managerial changes. And that is that I think because this particular sacking, it's sort of been coming, hasn't it? And because it's been coming, we've all expected it. It's always been a question of when rather than if. But I think sacking a manager, I mean, what are we now? The 20th of January, the 22nd of January. And by the time they get a new coach in, the transfer window practically is going to be gone, isn't it? The transfer window's slammed shut at the end of the month. He's not going to be able to bring in reinforcements, which I think this Bolton Wanderers side desperately need. If I'm being perfectly honest, I do think they need reinforcements. I'm not saying this squad's terrible. I'm not saying, and that's a fantastic player mods. I'm not saying that this squad should make top 6. I think there are players in there that are definitely capable of pushing into the playoffs, but is the team as a whole capable? Probably not. I'm not saying that Ian Evatt was inexcusable for any of this because, look, I think it's very easy to point faults. I think it's very, very easy when you look at the style of play and the way things were going. It was obvious that he had to face the music, if you like. But realistically, if I throw some names at you now, this is the sort of 3 midfielders and 2 strikers that started against Charlton. Do these names, and anyone in the live chat, please get involved, do these names scream to you of a League One playoff team? So the 3 in midfield were Morley, Sheen and Thomason, and the 2 up front was a partnership of Randell and Collins. Are they realistically going to fire you into a League One playoff spot? Personally, I don't see it. I don't. I think there needs to be another couple of additions in there for me to make me convinced, because I think that we look at you look at League One at the start of the season. I said it at the time on the prediction show, is that the top end of League One was extremely competitive, and there was going to be 1 or 2 big teams miss out on the top 6 simply because of the traffic that was ahead of them. And I think Bolton have really sort of fallen into that trap.
So I'm going to quickly play you a video, and we were talking about this particular press conference a couple of weeks ago on the Football League Weekly. And as I said a minute ago, Ian Evatt has always had a very weird relationship with the football media. I'm going to read you some quotes later on from 2021 as well, which back in 21 I was talking about on the Football League Weekly as well. But Ian Evatt said this about 3 weeks ago, or maybe 2, during a press conference.
Whether people think it or not, changing me isn't going to help, because the same players are out there. It's the same personalities, it's the same mentalities, it's the same attributes and skill sets. They have to start delivering, and it's about time they did.
Just on.
So who do you blame? Do you blame the players? Do you think a lot of blame needs to go down to the Bolton players? Or do you think Evatt needs to take more responsibility? Because he's been there for a while. There's been a lot of expectations for them to finally get that promotion into the Championship. But who should take that blame?
I think it has to fall down, doesn't it? It has to fall down on Ian Evatt. At the end of the day, it's his job to set the team up tactically. It's his job to motivate these players to perform at the best in which they can. And I know that I just said that the team overall doesn't excite me for a League One playoff push, but there are quality players within this side that, at their best, could do just that. You look at Aaron Collins. I think if you get the best out of him, you've got a really good striker for League One level. I think the likes of Scott Arfield. Okay, he's 36 years old now, but Scott Arfield is a player that I do really, really like. And it's not just because of the Rangers past there, but I really like Scott Arfield in central midfield. I like Jay Matete in midfield. He's a very good option to have. But I think that comment there is absolutely spot on. I think when you sell Dion Charles to Huddersfield, I want to say, was it Huddersfield? It was, wasn't it? Yeah. I think when you sold Dion Charles to Huddersfield, to a promotion rival as well, it almost screams of me as Bolton Wanderers chucking the sort of towel in, to be honest. Because again, you look at the strikers that they've actually got past him, John McAtee, Aaron Collins and Victor Adeboyojo. Again, when you're playing 2 up front, are they really going to inspire you for a push? No, they're not. And I know that Dion Charles isn't the most prolific or isn't the most consistent in terms of scoring goals, but he was doing that, wasn't he? He was doing that about when he was finding the back of the net. And the one thing that you shouldn't do in a promotion race, if Bolton are in a promotion race, the one thing that you shouldn't do is sell to a rival within that same race. And it's exactly what Bolton's done. So I think since then, I do think it's them throwing the season away, which feels mad. It feels mad sitting here and saying that, because they are only 3 points off the playoffs. If results go their way this weekend, they could find themselves back into the top 6 on goal difference, So potentially, they're not a million miles away. I mean, the comment there talks about defensively they are appalling, and yes, they are, but more I'd concentrate on the style of play. It is obvious for me that these players can't play a possession-based style of football playing out from the back. And because Ian Evatt was so sort of determined to play that style of football, I think that's really what's costing me his job here. I think the lack of adjusting to the players he actually has is one that is a quality that is quite large. He hasn't adjusted to his players. He's been so sort of stubborn and so sort of insistent on playing this style of football that it has cost him. And how many more times are we going to sit here and say that about managers and head coaches? But unfortunately, I think his stubbornness has sort of caught up with him here. And the reason why we've seen the way he has been with the press is because he was a man under pressure.
So let's go back in our time machine to 2021 when Ian Evatt claimed to the media that they were the best team in League One. Back then, they were 8th in League One, 2 points off of the playoffs. This was when he made that statement, which was a very solid position considering their recent promotion from League Two. But the reason I say this is because that season they finished in 9th place. I remember talking with David on here about that very statement that he made to the media. And I kind of said back then, I think we both said it, that Egg could easily go into his face for those kind of comments. Well, since then, they haven't backed that up. They haven't been promoted to the Championship. That was about 3 years ago now. In hindsight, I know Ian Evatt got them promoted from League Two into League One. But how do you view his tenure at the club? Because a lot of people have a lot of positive memories about his spell at the club. But could we maybe be a little more critical? Or is that perhaps me being a little harsh for saying that?
I think it's a tough one. I think if you sort of split his tenure sort of in two, then you got a real sort of positive side with the promotion, getting back into League One in his first season. He should get a lot of credit for that. And he did lead them to the EFL Trophy final as well, didn't he? Where they did lose, they lost to Oxford in 2023 that year. So again, you have to give him credit for this. These aren't easy things to achieve in football. You don't do this via a fluke or two, do you? I think he deserves credit for that. But as we all know, within football, we all have short memories, don't we? It's a trait that all football fans at some point are guilty of. We have short memories. And unfortunately, the sour taste being left in the mouth of the Bolton fans is that they had a very, very good chance, didn't they, to get, or in a good position to get promoted last season. They lost out to Derby County, didn't they, on that spot on the final day of the season last year. I don't know how the playoffs went. They got to the final, didn't they? Then lost to Oxford. So they were in a very, very good chance of actually achieving promotion last season. They didn't do that. That bad sort of spell has now lingered onto this season and has sustained within this season as well. I mean, you look at just a few results and what's going on. Burnley are 5-0 up. But also,
5-0 up?
That's insane. What the
first half?
I mean, people listening back, they're 5-0 up. What the? I can refer to minutes. What the fuck is going on? Plymouth.
God, yeah.
Wow.
Because I was hoping to go up there and do and see a few games, but 5-0 up. God, we have plenty to talk about next week, don't we?
That really caught me off because I got notifications on my phone for the games. Hence why you may see me looking over here sort of occasionally for my phone lights up for notifications, and that really sort of caught my eye and went, "Holy crap!" 5. We're still on the first. That's mad. Also, people listening back, aren't they? And obviously know what's going on. But us live,
probably
that is insane. It's
our guy having Miller's 23-24 season, says he.
100%. But we sort of examined, don't we? Back on subject. We examined, don't we? Evatt's playing style, and I think when you look at the results against sort of local rivals, against local teams, I think that's where you can examine it very, very deeply. You look at the loss to Stockport, 5-0, the loss to Wigan 2-0, the loss at home to Huddersfield by 4-0, where 2 or 3 of those goals were easily avoidable. It opens him up, doesn't it, for such a deep examination of his style of play that realistically he is going to get criticised a lot more than what he may have done in previous seasons. You look at the Charlton game, you referenced it a couple minutes ago. You look at the Charlton game, that was the 10th defeat already. We've only played 26 games. So realistically, can we say that the push for playoffs is? I know they're only 3 points off the playoffs, but as we all know, winning is a good habit to have, but also losing can form its own habit, can't it? So having already lost 10 games out of 26, it's going to be a big job, isn't it, for whoever does come in?
And finally, before we do wrap up, here are the managerial odds for the next Bolton manager, obviously. Steven Schumacher is currently 2-1 to take over. Liam Richardson is 6-1, with Ryan Lowe currently being 8-1. There are 3 names currently tied on 10-1, according to the bookies at the moment. Rob Edwards, Des Buckingham, and Sam Allardyce. That would be fascinating to see him back there. Other names that have been bandied around at considerably higher odds: Gary O'Neill, Russell Martin, Lee Johnson, Dave Challoner, Neil Lennon, Nicky Butt, Nigel Clough. But the 4 names, who we should really be paying a key eye to is Steven Schumacher, Liam Richardson, Ryan Lowe, and I guess Rob Edwards as well, though as I just said, he's tied on 10-1 with Des Buckingham and Sam Allardyce. So out of the realistic names there, because, let's be honest here, I don't think a Sam Allardyce is going to go to Bolton at this stage in his career. He might do. Weirder things have happened. But what do you make of the likes of Schumacher and Lowe being linked to the job? Because I reckon Steven Schumacher might be a bit of a coup for Bolton. What do you make of it?
So are you saying that John Terry wouldn't be a realistic candidate for this job? He was linked to previous EFL jobs, wasn't he?
He's been linked to every EFL job. He's been linked to every EFL job that has ever become available. So if he does, I will eat my shoe live here on this show. I'll wear a Norwich shirt.
I've got a... This sounds really bad out of context. I have got a Norwich scarf that you could display behind you there, mate. I should say that the only reason why I've got that is because of a Secret Santa gift at work that didn't go well. But I think you should put that up behind you for an episode if John Terry gets this job.
See, if John Terry gets a job, I'll put a Norwich scarf. If you're watching on audio, then right behind me is like display of like Ipswich shirts. I'll put a Norwich scarf right here. So there we go. But more realistically, Ryan Lowe and Schumacher are better managers, obviously, than John Terry, who's never done anything. So what do you make of those names?
Yeah, I think everyone on this podcast by now, even if you're just a short-term listener, you know my admiration for Steven Schumacher. I think the job that he done at Plymouth was one that really did impress me. He got them promoted out of League One into the Championship. Okay, he did ditch them, didn't he, pretty soon after that, but he did get them out of League One. And I think that's the aim for Bolton Wanderers right now. I think that the aim for Bolton is to get themselves out of League One and into the Championship. Do I think that the squad represents one that does do that? Probably not, if I'm being realistic. Like I say, it probably does need a few more additions to it before I am convinced that it can push for a top 6 finish. But I do think getting the head coach or manager who has previously been there and done that could be a very, very good route to go down. And he can also attract some very sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? He can attract some high caliber of players because of what he's done at League One level in the past. So people are going to get bored of me sort of singing the praises of Steven Schumacher on this podcast, but he'd be one I'd definitely be looking at. And the other name that I would sort of point out would be Rob Edwards. Controversially, I'll get your opinion on this in a second. And anyone in the live chat, let me know what's your opinion of Rob Edwards being linked to the Bolton job. I think it'd be a big mistake. I think it would be a huge mistake for Rob Edwards to bounce back into management as quick as this. I think because of the way that things ended at Luton Town, I think he just needs a break from football. I think at times the best way for a manager to rebuild his reputation is to take a break from football. Just take 6 months out, just take a year out, look to go back into management in the summer, you just take a period of time out of football, because let's be honest, the way it ended at Luton was far from ideal, wasn't it? It got a little bit toxic towards the end there. So I do think that Rob Edwards does need to take a bit of time out of football before he went into it. So as much as it would be a very good sort of pickup from Bolton, I do think that Rob Edwards himself needs a bit of time out of football. So I think out of that list, I'd be really impressed to see Steven Schumacher go there. Like I say, I think his experience of previously getting out of League One, therefore his ability to attract the calibre of player to do that again, would be a really good addition for Bolton.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on by saying that. I think Steven Schumacher would be a bit of a coup at this level as well. But we are live on the Football League Weekly Extra. So if you are listening on repeat, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, the next bit isn't going to be relevant to you at all. But here are the halftime scores at the moment in the Championship. By the time most of the second halves start, or anyway, the second half at Home Park anyway, we will be off the air. But currently it's Leeds United 1, Norwich 0, Portsmouth 3, Stoke City 1, Sheffield Wednesday 1, Bristol City 1, and Plymouth Argyle 0. And this is at half time, Burnley 5. So yeah, we gave you our live reaction to how Plymouth Argyle are performing. Real quickly, because this isn't the Football League Weekly, this is the Football League Weekly Extra, where we shouldn't really be spouting our opinions out about other EFL teams besides from Bolton or the major breaking news at this very moment. But Plymouth Argyle, we'll be talking about them on next week's show in a lot more detail. But a quick preview on what we're going to be talking about. How poor have they been this season? And controversially, I'd consider them to be one of the worst Championship clubs in Championship history. They only have 21 points at the moment. Wayne Rooney was an absolutely abysmal appointment. So where do you have Plymouth Argyle in your list of worst ever Championship teams?
I think that the squad becomes a lot weaker should they lose Morgan Whittaker. I think if they lose him, then the squad becomes a lot weaker than what it currently is. He has been linked away with a very strong link away to Burnley, hasn't he? He has been linked very, very strongly to the Clarets, and he's not in the Plymouth squad tonight. So potentially there is a move there to be developed over the next couple of days, and we could be sat here next week talking about Morgan Whittaker being signed for Burnley. But I think Plymouth are in a world of trouble. I really do. I don't see a shining light for them. I don't. I really do rate the new manager, Melic. Is it Melic? Meslic?
Muselic, yeah.
Muselic. Oh, it's been a long day at work. I do rate Muselic. We've all seen his video, haven't we, from his speech, the 4-minute video on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's an incredible speech, and even sitting there, just sort of listening to it, I was pumped. I was ready to go play football. I was ready to get my old boots on, and run onto a football field again. But unfortunately, if we do bring it back down to earth with him, just being a good speaker doesn't do anything on the pitch, does it? You can have the best speech in the world, but it all depends on how you set your team up tactically and how you motivate them as well. So that only gets you sort of so far. Is it too early to say, especially if Morgan Whittaker does leave, that Plymouth Argyle could find themselves in for a long slog and potentially could be as far as relegated? I think that's a good debate to have next week, because I've sat here before. I sat here a couple of weeks ago. I think I sat here when the episode a couple of weeks ago, and I sat here praising Morgan Whittaker and just saying what happened the next game. He went and scored. So I know what I'm talking about. But you look at sort of bright sparks for Plymouth season. It's Morgan Whittaker, it's Sissoko when he's been on form. They have struggled with injuries, haven't they? We have to add that into context. They have really struggled with injuries. Captain Joe Edwards, of course, has only recently come back to full fitness, hasn't he? And starting games for them again. But if you're going to look for positives, it's tough. The positive is they're only 6 points from safety, and the team who are on 21st is Derby County. So I think realistically they could be caught, but something that has to be addressed at Plymouth straight away from the get-go, which hasn't been addressed tonight, is how many goals they do concede. They've conceded 60 goals this season. It's simply far too many. You even look at the game tonight, they're 5-0 down at half-time. He's got a big job on his hands, I think, to turn this Plymouth Argyle side into a respectable season. I think he's got such a tough job. He really has.
And we have all of that to discuss next week as well on the Football League Weekly. So you can find us on Twitter at OverTheBarFB. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. We are on Instagram as well. Simply type in Over the Bar onto Instagram. I'll find the link and put it somewhere soon. And you can also find us on TikTok as well and on Threads. Basically every social media platform you can think of. And before we go, Rhys, real quickly, where can people find your new vlogs?
So you find me on Twitter, not X. It's at RhysCurtis14. Keep an eye on this Twitter account for new vlogs uploaded. Keep an eye on Ben's Twitter. Keep an eye on Over the Bars. It'll be posted across all 3 of those channels.
And we will be back next week for another edition of the Football League Weekly. And who knows, if anything significant happens, like Scott Parker, I don't know, leaving Burnley, or Mucilic leaving Plymouth, then we will be back with you for another Football League Weekly extra. So we will see you all next week.